I would like to welcome the three people that my nephew has predicted will actually view this episode to the first episode of In Space and on the Left.
Choose to go.
We don't have victories. Reaching for new heights.
Hey, my name is Justin. I am a journalism graduate from Texas State University, and I've worked on things such as the Generation on Earth Day projects and such like that, and I have a focus on environmental law.
Yeah, he's getting ready to take the LSATs, and so he can go and help save the world using the legal system.
Dude, you gotta hit him on two fronts. You gotta educate and actually be out there making the change. Education's not enough. Education's important, but it's not enough.
Educate, obstruct, and reform.
Yes.
And what was the other one from the resistant? Agitate. So anyway, with that general ethos out of the way of my nephew, I'm Carl Clark, and I'm also a graduate of Texas State University, but I got my master's degree. And
why don't you go ahead and tell them what your undergrad degree was, Carl, if you want to start slinging that around.
Yeah. Mine was in studio fine arts painting and a minor in art history. So
he's actually really good at art. I just give him crap for getting that.
Because I have an art history minor, I can make a lot of really cool jokes about French Impressionists relating to the Roman Empire and how that relates to the Qing dynasty in China. So
fascinating stuff. Fascinating, yeah, exactly. Riveting. We're getting them hooked from the very beginning.
Well, first of all, for my half of this, I do need to put this disclaimer out there because if other people, if anybody ends up looking up my stuff, right now I am a civil servant, so everything that is expressed here on this podcast is my opinion and my opinion only. And of course, anything that's expressed here is my nephew's opinion and his opinion only. None of these opinions represent any organizations or entities other than In Space and on the Left.
Exactly. And I want to also give a disclaimer.
With the Hatch Act, I follow the orders of the duly elected representatives of the United States. I firmly believe in the Constitution and serving the American people through it, but these are my opinions. That being said...
See, that seems like something that can just go in a disclaimer on the website.
Well, I think for the first episode, it's good to get out of the way.
No,
the next part that I'm going to say is I have had a lot of experience through my master's degree working in and around the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. I interned at the Johnson Space Center, the Goddard Space Flight Center, and I'm wrapping up an internship at Stennis. So even though I'm a communications person, and I am by that nature not an engineer, not a scientist, I am a very intimate observer of what goes on when it comes to space industry, space exploration, and space science in general.
So, I would say also, whereas your unique aspect to that is you are tapped into multiple branches because you are in the public relations department of NASA. You're tapped into multiple branches, and you have kind of a more overreaching knowledge, whereas some engineers might only have knowledge on their certain projects and the ones that immediately affect them. You kind of have a take on NASA as a whole, and I really appreciate that insight you give.
I won't make that comment, but I appreciate that. The other thing I will say, both Justin and I want to offer congratulations to SpaceX for their amazing launch yesterday. At the time,
it was so cool. It was so cool.
Yeah, and they managed
go watch the YouTube video if you haven't. It'll be in the link. Like, just watch the YouTube video.
They managed to land their first stage on a barge, which they've done before. But this was one of the stages this is the stage that did it the first time. So this is a reused first stage, or a flight-proven first stage, is what they said. So it's a major engineering achievement, and the hope is that this will help, if they can get fast turnaround, reduce the cost of access to space, which is a big deal, which we will touch on actually in my section. Because on March 21st, the President of the United States signed the NASA Authorization Act of 2017. And
hold on, before we get too far into that, can I also give a congratulations to California and New York for being the first two states to oppose the executive independence, energy independence order, which we'll get to more later. But I also just wanted to shout out California and New York.
Well, because
They
we're from Texas, we can't actually do that. We'll just say that we're happy that somebody somewhere out there is doing something right, and it was Texas that actually gave them the idea to do it in the first place.
Yeah, Texas, we got it all under control,
If
guys.
you
Don't worry,
guys
we're
can't
gonna.
tell by the name of the show, we are left-wing hippy dippy bleeding hearts, but we are both from Texas. So yeah, not quite what I would call, and this is a shout out to somebody that I admire, not quite like Trey Crowder and the liberal redneck and his crew, but kind of in the same vein. We're both city slickers, though. Well, we're city slickers from the South, but we're also very,
Can
very
you?
liberal.
I don't think you can call me a city slicker, man. Like San Marcos is kind of a city, but where my parents live, man, that's out in the country.
Yeah. But you also moved out of Texas like an apostate and went and lived in a place that shall not be named, um, SoCo, and yeah. So and
Dude,
that was pretty close to the city.
we were part of the scouting party for Texas to see if it was worth capturing California and making it like
making
Texas
making
would
it great
span
again.
from, yeah, Texas would span from where it is now all the way to the Pacific coast. We would just take over all the states in between.
Right.
But I think California would give us a little bit of a trouble just because everything's always on fire out there.
Yeah, that's a bit of a problem. Climate change. It's a difficult thing to deal with.
Yeah. All
Um,
right. Getting back down to business. Just so since this is our first episode and we're still kind of getting the bugs out of the system, it'll take a few. But the format of the show is going to be typically two topics where we give like 20, 30 minutes to each topic. Typically, I'm going to do something on the environment. Carl's probably going to do something on space. But that's not always going to be the case. And then we are thinking of having like single topic episodes that would kind of go more in depth on certain things. But this is not a news show. This is a kind of policy and science commentary show where we just kind of talk about stuff that interests us that's going on in politics, science, the world, all that kind of cool stuff. But it is not a news show. But all of our information is going to be, we're going to try to do our best to make sure it's factually sound, and that whenever we argue a position or something like that, that we're confident in our understanding and knowledge of it. We're not here to try to promote ignorance or anything like that.
and we are usually going to safely argue from a left-wing perspective. Thus, the on the left.
Yeah.
Though, since it's in space and on the left, you might say, "Man, that guy's got some serious moves. He's drifting lazily to the left." Um, which is actually how I came about my liberal awakening. Is I drifted slowly in that direction. But anyway,
Well,
so
yeah.
the big
Growing up in Texas, like it's kind of a slower process than other places.
so the
The
big
culture where you're born
space
to find you.
news, um, because you know me, I'm going to just prattle on about this too long, and I don't want to take up too much time in the introduction. The big space news was, like I said, the signing of the NASA Authorization Act of 2017. So this was a bill that was introduced in the Senate by Senator Ted Cruz. It is a bipartisan bill. The ranking member on the committee is Senator Nelson from Florida. He's a Democrat. So this is a bipartisan bill. It was signed by President Trump, surrounded by a lot of the representatives, both from the House and the Senate, a couple of the folks from the NASA transition team, two astronauts, including the astronaut chief and astronaut Tracy Caldwell Dyson, which the very next day she was down in Jackson, Mississippi at Stennis Space Center's Capitol Day. So not only did she travel around the world a whole lot when she went in space, she was also traveling around the country a whole lot, because that's what astronauts do in their spare time, is travel around the country and train, mostly training. But they are also our most recognized ambassadors. I shouldn't say they are also NASA's most recognized ambassadors. And so NASA uses them a lot for that as well. But trust me when I tell you, most of their time is done
Man,
training.
we're getting like to George R. R. Martin levels with these names and characters playing.
Act. Well, a NASA Authorization Act is essentially two committees in Congress, one in the House, one in the Senate, that deal with NASA policy. And they take learned testimony, and then they write up these laws which give a set of guidelines to both the president and the appropriations committees in the House and Senate when they get ready to sit down and write budgets, and when the president gets ready to recommend his budget or her budget, and also when the president sets their agenda for the agency. And so this is a guideline for both of those things. So it recommends an appropriations of $19.5 billion, which I've seen some math where it keeps NASA right with inflation, some math where it's a little bit above, a little bit below, so it's somewhere in there. And that's kind of what's been expected by a lot of the research institutions, like the National Science Foundation and a number of others that have done studies on major NASA initiatives, which are
But
usually.
real quick, this is an appropriations, not a budget, right?
Yeah, this is recommended appropriations.
Just so it's recommended spending. This
Yeah,
hasn't.
it's recommended spending. All
All
of
right.
these things are recommended, and it's not just spending; it's also policy. But
Yeah.
whenever you do policy, policy costs money. Rocket fuel costs money. Some of our spaceship parts are made of gold. That costs money. Gold is sometimes money.
That's
Um,
not because NASA just wants to have all the blingiest stuff. Like it's just a good conductor, right? I mean, a bad
no, it's
conductor.
because we want the blingiest stuff.
Oh,
Actually, it reflects sunlight really well, and it's fairly lightweight and malleable as a metal. So,
it's
um,
just it's a good mineral for the job, and
yeah,
it also
and it's
looks
not
nice.
really, really lightweight. Lightweight. I know probably some material scientist will end up commenting, it's not lightweight, but it's malleable, and you can thin it out really thin. So,
Yeah.
it's good for that kind of stuff like that. Anyway, so that's what this is, and one of the things about it that I think is important to note, those that know about space policy, this was to be expected. This is when the Democrats were writing the bills and stuff like that, the NASA Authorization Acts of like 2010. This was to be expected. Like what we expected out of the Democrats is what we got out of the Democrats. What we expect out of the Republicans is what we get out of the Republicans. And NASA has become a little bit of a political pinball lately, but there's a lot of the big middle of NASA that is agreed upon. And so, like the mandates for missions to Mars in the 2030s, the journey to Mars. Now, in the ceremony, they were trying to couch it as, oh, Trump is setting NASA on the pathway to Mars. In fact, one of the guys in the video, I forget his name, but he was trying to perform verbal fellatio on the president, going, President Eisenhower is always remembered as the guy that did the infrastructure for the country, and you'll always be remembered as being the interplanetary highway president. And the president kind of made a joke about, well, we need to fix our highways, which is stuff that he said in the campaign, which is like, oh my God, do you even know what you're signing? And it was just kind of funny because Eisenhower also created NASA, right?
Uh-huh.
So he wasn't just an infrastructure guy, he was an exploration and science guy. Abraham Lincoln, in the worst war this country has ever done, actually founded, I believe, the National Science Foundation.
Oh, cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, like, so you can be more than one thing, bro. You can be more than one thing. Also, just.
It also seems like there's a. I mean, I know correlation doesn't cause causation, but it seems kind of like the presidents who had sound scientific and exploration in mind also were pretty good at making decisions in other fields. So I think it's just a tribute to
there is a
well-rounded.
causation there, my friend. I do not think that there
Yeah,
is
it's
a
just
correlation.
it well-rounded presidents make good presidents.
Yeah. So anyway, so we have the general outline for the Mars is in 2033. NASA hopes to be past the intermediary phase of orbiting the moon and operating out in deep space in what's called helio, which is orbiting Earth, but your helio orbit, your orbiter, or not orbiting Earth, orbiting around the sun, but your orbit around the sun is a little bit off. It's what's called eccentric, and that means you will intersect with the Earth's sphere of influence again, and it'll pull you back in and you come home. But it's going to be like a 240-day mission, right? So there's all this stuff in between where we are right now with the space station, the ISS, and Mars in 2033. But we won't land on Mars in 2033, most likely. All the studies that have been done are kind of saying we'll be in orbit, we'll visit Phobos, which is in an equatorial orbit, so the equator of the
Man,
Earth.
it seemed like 5 years ago they were so sure that we were going to be there on 2030. I hate to see it keep getting pushed back.
Well, the
Yeah,
reason
I
why I say
feel
2033 isn't because they were advertising the 2030s and everybody kind of
yeah,
heard
yeah.
2030. But the reason why it's 2033 is because that's when the planets actually line up.
Oh, okay. It's like when they're the closest
Yeah,
trip and everything.
it's when you can do what's called a Holman transfer.
Yeah, I
So
understand. Like the people that make these decisions have way more information on it than I do. I'm just a like I just understand how they can kind of have a and they're working on it, and that's what you're working on, a public relations image where people feel like if we're not meeting these guidelines, then I know I've talked to people, especially down in Texas, that think that, well, if they're constantly not making timelines, then why do we still have them around? Which is obviously not the mindset that I adopt. Um, I feel that they're doing what they need to do to get us there in the best possible and safest manner.
well, also like the
Just,
technology progresses, and so there's been,
yeah,
and also the methodology progresses. So like back during the Bush 43 administration, there was
yeah.
Constellation, which was going to
It's
be,
almost like these people are experts on what they're doing, and
yeah.
we should trust them a little
Well,
bit at least.
sometimes
A little bit.
some of them say some really stupid stuff. Don't get me wrong, but that's more my
Don't we
opinion
all
than
say
anything
some
else.
stupid stuff?
I can forgive them because they also say some smart stuff other times. But anyway, so that's the plan for Mars, and we'll visit Phobos. It's an easy place to get to because it's orbiting around Mars's equator, and that is easy to get to because when you go between planets, you kind of want to intersect and go on the equator because of the conservation of angular momentum and a bunch of other physicsy stuff. And so Phobos is a nice place to visit, possibly Mars.
You mean witchcraft?
Yeah, witchcraft. I'm sorry, sorcery.
Yeah.
Devil work. We're gonna draw a pentagram on Mars, and it's gonna be the video game Doom. Oh my god.
There we go.
Oh, that would be so cool.
Dude, and then you can just like it would be like Westworld but with Doom on Mars,
God,
where you just have like you have like robot zombie aliens that attack you.
that sounds so good. All right, so moving along.
Hey, SpaceX, that's how you get us to Mars, man. You just make it the Doom version of Westworld.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, moving along, we have the commercial space contracts, and a lot of them in here are going to be what's called fixed pricing contracts. And the two big ones are commercial cargo and commercial crew, which is deliveries to the space station. And hopefully, we're going to have commercial crew very soon. We already have commercial cargo right now. And there's several companies that are doing that, and they're going to be two companies primarily that are going to do commercial cargo. So that was
Yeah.
something that was done, and now this is something going all the way back to Reagan, like commercialization of space and doing what we did with the airline industry, where we subsidized their development because the development costs are so high, and then eventually we set them free like beautiful little butterflies and let them live or die on the market.
And now they charge you $12 for a Coke and a bag of peanuts. I will not allow that to happen again, Carl.
Never again.
Get your government out of my nuts.
Hashtag never again. So that's the general idea, and these things were hinted at all the way during the Reagan administration.
Well, that's pretty cool that they've had those plans in place for that long.
Well, it was kind of like talked about, and people were hinting at it for a long, long time. But finally, in the mid years of the Bush administration of W, it really became a thing. SpaceX managed to stick something in orbit. The X Prize to get something into suborbit happened.
Yeah, I remember when they started making headlines. It was like small stuff at first, and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden it would be like, "Whoa, they were able to pull that off. That's awesome."
Yeah, and now we're landing stages that have already
Yeah,
been used again.
not
We're
to
on
not to
freaking
mention
barges in the middle
NASA.
of the Atlantic.
Yeah, NASA needs to adopt SpaceX's method for PR because I feel like their public image is just like they put more effort into it than NASA does.
The one thing I will say about that is like it's a generational thing. Like if you talk to the Gen Xers and older, NASA's still the creme de la creme. You talk to millennials and younger, SpaceX and Jeff Bezos and Blue Origin are like,
Really?
oh man, they're the bee's knees. And if you talk to really, really young
Hmm.
kids, especially when they come to NASA, it's like
I
you
wonder.
guys are so freaking
Yeah,
cool.
I wonder if it's because they're like the millennials like version of people like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs
Yeah.
and people who were such big pioneers in a certain
Which, by the
industry
way,
that they
you know who
they became celebrities
I
almost.
heard this from Neil deGrasse Tyson, so if I'm wrong on this, blame him. But you know who was inspired to go into tech at least partially because of the moon landings? Steve Jobs
Who?
and Bill Gates. They were like, "Oh, look at the
Damn.
power of computers," and
Yeah, that's cool.
yeah. So I mean, it
Well,
wasn't their whole
yeah.
inspiration. This was in the book Space Chronicles by Neil deGrasse Tyson. So I'm just plugging other people's stuff that's way more popular than this show.
Yeah.
But anyway, moving along. This International Space Station is authorized till 2024, which at that point, I personally think we need to we need to deorbit it, or we need to fully hand it over to either our international partners to operate, or we need to hand it over to private industry and our international partners to operate, or just
Really, you don't think it's worth the upkeep investment?
not if we want to get to Mars. The budgets that are in all these studies say that NASA has a flat budget, and if you keep the space station around past 2028, you're going to start really hindering the exploration factor
Yeah,
of human
but
missions.
if we can give it over to some of our space allies,
Yeah.
if that's what you want to
Well,
call
like
them,
what
and
I'm
we just we make agreements where we still have American research going on the vessel. It's like kind of like the
well,
like
they're private institutions that are also national laboratories, and the International Space Station
yeah,
is also a national laboratory, which means institutions can feed funding into it. So,
yeah.
but the day-to-day operation would no longer be in the preview of NASA. We need to transition to deep space exploration. We will have learned.
Yeah, and that kind of makes sense. It seems like NASA stuff like that definitely has a life cycle where it's good and it's excellent up to a certain point, but then if you want to be able to do the next grand thing, you kind of have to know when the cutoff point is for
Yeah,
some of the older stuff.
and I think 2024, 2028 is pushing it, but but all the studies that I've seen have pointed to like that's the Evolvable Mars campaign. It's the pathways, explorations, rationales, and approaches for a U.S. program of human space exploration, Humans to Mars Report 2016. Like all of them say, like 2028 is the cutoff. Like 2030 is like, oh crap, it's getting bad, and you guys really need to stop this program because you're jeopardizing our ability to send people to Mars. Um, and then generally there is support for planetary and astrophysics missions, except for one planet, and that's Earth. But we'll get to that. So the good,
The least important planet.
yeah, the least important planet. We only live here. um, it belongs in a museum. So I kind of break the bill down into the good, the bad, and the ugly because you know it's the good, bad, and the ugly. Man, how can you not make at least one reference?
Eh, I think as long as you stick with the one reference, it's all right.
Okay. Well, I've already made a Star Wars reference, Indiana Jones reference, and now, I mean, I think I'm
Get
ready.
like a reference tally going.
Yeah, am I at my quota?
Welcome to the In Space and on the Left drinking game.
Exactly. The hint, hint. So one of the good things that was done in there is they
I mean,
consulted.
you're gonna need a drink if you're gonna listen to us ramble about
Yeah, they
stuff.
consulted Scott Kelly, who came back from the Year in Space mission, and they created the TREAT program, which not only provides healthcare, though not total and universal healthcare, no matter what, but healthcare for space-related activities on long-duration missions for our astronauts in the future, which is good. Also, side story, I don't know how true this is, but I heard on the grapevine back when I was a tour guide a really cool story. So the astronauts, when the Johnson Space Center was going to get opened, they were obviously preview to a lot of these decisions about where it was going to be. And while they weren't in on the land deal with Rice University and Humble Oil that ended up being the land where the Johnson Space Center is, they knew where that land was. And so they started buying up the land around it. Now, eventually they sold it, and so it's not owned by the astronauts anymore. But that money that they would continuously get because people would build stuff on their land or sell it, they sold the land, that money is in a trust. And when you become an astronaut, you pay into that trust just a little bit. And then if something happens to you, your family gets a portion of that trust.
Oh, so it's kind of like a shared life insurance.
Yeah, but it's not. It's like off the books type stuff. So that's why I
Oh,
don't
that's
know
kind
how
of cool.
true it is. But like, just scuttlebutt that I would hear
Yeah.
about things that happened in in NASA history. So I don't know how true it is. If somebody knows anything about it or that it's not true, please let me
You know
know
what?
because that's
Knowing the culture of NASA, I would be inclined to believe that that's the case.
well, it was
Some
very
pretty amazing individuals.
well, also like it's the esprit de corps. Not to not to forget the sisterhood, but it was the brotherhood back then. You know, now it's the brother and sisterhood,
Yeah.
and so that's part of NASA's DNA that came from the military. So, but anyway, so there's the TREAT program, which also mandates studies on long duration space flight, things like that. Most of the testimony on the Mars missions is being followed. I really, really want us to visit Phobos too, because more planetary science is awesome. And then, like I said before, it's what we expected. Like, it is what we expected.
Yeah.
But here's the kicker about the planetary science is there was something in the Obama plans called the asteroid redirect mission, where we were going to send out a solar electric autonomous vehicle. It uses xenon gas and ionizes it, and that's what it uses for thrust. Really, really super efficient, but low thrust.
Yeah.
They talked about that mission, but they said, we're not going to go grab an asteroid rock anymore, something like the size of a Mini Cooper, right? We're not going to go grab one of those and fly it back and stick it in lunar orbit and go investigate it. Well, here's the problem with that. Like, if you don't do that, then visiting Phobos is more risky because you now have to learn, once you get to Mars, 35 to 400 million miles away, you have to do for the first time operate in a low gravity environment like that of a comet or an asteroid, because that's basically what Phobos is. Which, by the way,
Okay.
Phobos and Deimos are the lords of terror and fear, and they're
Oh
also the
man.
horses that pulled Mars's chariot. But they're the Greek ones because the planets are Roman, the moons are Greek. So anyway, the ARM mission did a couple of other things. We were going to grab this rock from a bigger rock, and so what we were going to do is we were going to stick the ARM vehicle off of the asteroid, and we were going to turn on its engines, and we were going to cancel out the pull the asteroid had on the vehicle.
Okay.
But that doesn't cancel out the pull the vehicle has on the asteroid. So it was actually going to gravity tug it, right? With
That sounds like
use gravity
gravity
to
tug
pull it.
sounds like an Overwatch move or like a Heroes of the Storm move.
Um, kind of. I mean, like
No, it sounds cool.
literally using gravity to move it. Which,
That's awesome.
if you guys remember, back in 2013, there was some really amazing footage of a Russian city with a big fireball that blew up over it. That detonated in the air. That was an asteroid that detonated in the air with 300 times the force of the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. Fortunately, when it blew up, it was like 12 miles up, right? So only
Yeah.
windows got blown out. Some people, unfortunately, got cut and knocked off their feet and freaked out, right? But no one died.
But
And that was because that object wasn't very dense. If it had been dense, it would have gotten lower and air bursted then. And then I think the city was a city of like 40 or 50,000. They'd just be gone. Just wiped off
just
the map.
eradicated.
Yeah, completely.
Because would it have impacted or would
It
have
depends on
it
how dense it
exploded?
is.
It depends on the density.
Yeah, it depends on the density and the size because it's obviously it's going to burn away. But if it
So
was,
what this is kind of what ARM part of it is doing is where we can go and do research and stuff, but it's also preparing us to be able to redirect incoming
yeah,
basically space
because
shrapnel.
part of the Obama plan was to now unfortunately neither he nor Congress gave NASA enough money to do this, but it was to track down all of the possible city killing objects, which those are really hard to
So
track. They're a lot smaller than
they were
than the life-ending stuff.
so they were trying to basically make an asteroid bounty hunting team.
Yeah, one of my
That's
friends.
why would you not fund that? That's awesome.
One of my friends actually worked on it.
That is so cool.
And it was going to be like IG-88. It was going to be an autonomous, or the one that she was working on is an autonomous system where the telescopes categorize these things and figure out what they're made of, their density and their trajectory and all that kind of stuff like that.
And then we can send these.
Well, no,
these
it
little...
what the software program does. It takes all those factors and figures out which method is the best to redirect it, deflect it, or to try and destroy it. Which destroying it is the last thing you want to do.
It's an asteroid defense grid, basically.
Yeah. Well, it's like what is it? The Iron Legion for asteroids from the Avengers. Man, we are just getting into the references now. So
I'm telling you, like,
anyway, so the point of ARM that I think a lot of people never really got and criticized a lot is it synergizes with a lot of different stuff. So it synergizes with Mars. Because we get to visit Phobos. It synergizes with planetary science. It synergizes with the hunt for life. It synergizes with planetary protection, and also finally, it synergizes with the commercial cargo and crew contracts because we're trying to motivate a new industrial revolution in space. And if you
yeah, I
look,
mean, imagine if they could go mine asteroids.
yeah. So if you look at the plans of SpaceX, of Blue Origin, and United Launch Alliance, they're all talking about having outposts on the moon, space stations in Earth and lunar orbit, and also at these places called Lagrange points. Look up Lagrange. He was a really cool French mathematician. Um, and in between any two objects where one orbits the other, there are 5 kind of gravity neutral zones. And the idea would be to capture these things and bring them back and mine them for water, because water is rocket fuel, right? And then eventually, this would also encourage 3D printing technology, and so would the missions to Mars. So the ISRU, or in situ resource utilization, wouldn't just be for pulling carbon dioxide out of Mars's atmosphere and splitting it up so you get oxygen and you get some methane in there and all this kind of other good stuff. And you have rocket fuel to ascend from Mars. Um, you you will also try and get minerals and be able to 3D print silicates and even maybe metals, so you can have manufacturing on Mars, and that's a really crucial thing to long duration stays and eventually colonization years and years and years from now. But that is like one of the great things about Apollo that it did for American manufacturing is in the space business, it is exacting. Okay, like where I work right now, the engines that we're working on for the rocket that is being designed, there is negative 400 degree Fahrenheit fluid running through it, the liquid hydrogen. When it meets liquid oxygen and it combusts, it goes instantaneously to 6,000 degrees. And so the outside of the engine is like 40 something degrees, and the inside of the engine is 6,000 degrees. And there are materials in there that survive both simultaneously. And
That's nuts.
that is hard to do.
Yeah,
The
no kidding.
the turbo pumps revolve at about 37,000 RPM and have something like 25,000 horsepower, and they are the size of my desk, which is not big because I am poor.
But so like it's a lot of power contained in a not so large
Yeah, like
like
when you're
shell.
running through that assembly facility, which is like the coolest place in Stennis, other than the test stands when they're actually testing something, there's all these signs up: FOD, forward object debris, right? And
Uh-huh.
they're serious about it because if you have a little piece of paper that ends up in there and no one notices it, that's a shredded engine.
Because like
Yeah,
their movements are so precise.
yeah, everything. This is the bleeding edge of material science,
Yeah.
and that's what Apollo did for us. It made all of American manufacturing, because all the major engineering institutions and companies in the country
Well, yeah,
participated.
NASA has a huge history
Yeah.
of
So
being able to, they don't commercialize it themselves a whole lot, but being able to pass the discoveries on to the private sector to like enhance everyday materials.
right. So like that made all of American manufacturing a cut above the rest of the world, right? So with ARM, it encourages the best analogy. It's more complicated than this, but the best analogy I can say: the government is 10 million miles away from Earth, and the area between that 10 million miles and planet Earth is space for the free market and industry to do its thing and expand and learn and innovate and create commerce and facilitate scientific research in new environments, all that stuff.
And ARM is kind of the catalyst to all this stuff. It
Well,
allows us to start moving
it's
forward to these
designed,
things.
like I said, to synergize with a lot of different stuff, and part of the whole thing is eventually private industry. They want to go out and grab asteroids and mine them for water, like I was saying. Well, if
Yeah.
NASA does the technological development of the autonomous systems, of the ion electric propulsion, of the guidance and capture, of all these things that would cost a lot of money to do and possibly send you into the red for too many quarters and send you into Chapter 11, if NASA does that and then just says this is in the public domain, then that means pretty much everybody's on the even keel because they have NASA technology, NASA data, and then you just go. And whoever is able to manage best, manufacture best, and has the best business plan wins. And that is the free market at its best. And like I said, it's more complicated.
I would also say that is free market and government working together at its best.
Yes, that is true. And but the way I
And
always talk to my conservative friends about this is like, look, the government's out here 10 million miles away and getting ready to be 35 to 400 million miles away. From
it's
where.
taking on projects that have to run in the red for, like you said, a certain number of
Yeah,
quarters that would bankrupt other companies.
yeah,
But because they're the government, they
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 can do it.
have
Now
they
I know
have
it's
that
more
ability to have
complicated.
that
Like
cushion.
SpaceX is trying to get to Mars and all that kind of stuff like that, and I'll probably do a whole segment on that at some point. But I want to move on to the other bad thing in the budget that wasn't mentioned was the X-57, which was a aeronautics initiative. And God, I love Charlie Bolden. Charlie Bolden is amazing, and I also love Robert Lightfoot. Robert Lightfoot is a really good administrator of NASA. He's acting right now until the administration appoints someone and then is confirmed by the Senate. But holy crap, Charlie Bolden was amazing. And
And
because
who else did you say? It was Charlie Bolden and who else?
Robert Lightfoot, he's the current
Robert Light.
he's the current head of NASA. He's the interim until someone is named, which people are speculating it's going to be some dude from Oklahoma, one of the representatives there. So not even someone who really has dealt with the industry. Even I think I'm fuzzy on his
Wonderful.
on his credentials, so I'm probably totally wrong. He might have sat on some aerospace boards at one point. I know he's on the committees that in Congress that deal with NASA, so he's not bereft of knowledge. But Charlie Bolden is a freaking god. Okay, this is a dude who served his country in the Marine Corps, became a lieutenant general. He taught Navy pilots and Marine pilots how to fly at Annapolis. I think, if I remember correctly, he was the commander of an air wing in Desert Storm, but I don't have his bio in front of me.
So this guy is as close to a real life Superman as you can probably become.
Yeah, and a black Superman too. So remember those pictures of Obama where he's like Superman. He's opening up his shirt and it's underneath it the big O. With
Charlie Bolden is just kind of
yeah,
like, that's cute.
It's CB. It's CB instead because he always signed his emails Charlie B.
Nice.
And I got to meet him a couple of times. He's a super nice dude. He always says, "I love NASA so much, but I can't say all the best because I love the Corps so much." So,
I can respect that.
yeah, I can respect it too. Like, so anyway, this is before NASA, right? This is before NASA.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, he helps his wife with her education foundation, which is what he's.
Yeah. So this is Charlie Bolden the prequel.
This is Charlie Bolden the prequel. This is before he became one of the ultimate badasses of the fucking universe. Okay, like so, and then he flies into space 4 times in the space shuttle, right? He's a pilot on a couple of them, and he's a commander on 2 others. Okay.
Jesus.
On one of the flights, STS-31 in 1995 on April, I think it was 24th. That was his mission where he was the pilot. I will give you 3 guesses of the payload that he helped deploy on that mission, and I will give you this big hint that it was one of the most significant payloads that NASA has ever sent into space. Period.
The Hubble.
All right, fine. You already knew the answer to that. You cheated.
No, I didn't. I know you worked on the Hubble for a while, and I remember hearing his name.
The Hubble. And
the Hubble bubble.
The Hubble bubble, baby, and the Hubble bubble, baby, toil and trouble. And then, as an associate administrator, he helped defend the Hubble, and he worked on all the Hubble servicing missions, including trying to help save it with the 5th one that was canceled. And then it was revived because of both industry, academic, and mostly public outcry. And then, finally, after all of this, President Obama gets into office. Sally Ride and a number of other people hand him the Blue Ribbon Commission called the Augustine Commission. And at some point through all of this, I'm sure Charlie's name came up. Probably had some meetings with then the president-elect and then President Obama. And he was nominated and confirmed by the Senate. And he became our administrator. And I was...
And real quick, was he asked to resign by the current administration,
No,
or
no, he wasn't.
he wasn't? Okay.
No, he had said before the election, long before the election, actually back in April when he was or like January, when he was going around Congress and presenting the NASA budget for fiscal year 2016.
He kind of said he wasn't going to be around
Yeah, he was
after
like,
that.
"This is my last one. It's really bittersweet."
Yeah, I asked that. Yeah, I asked
People
that
were
not to
coming in and
discredit what
saying,
he was
"Hey,
doing.
I honestly just stopped by just to see you again." And he was respected on both sides of the aisle, insanely technically competent. But the one thing that he always said, and I know there's a big tangent away from the NASA Authorization Act, but I freaking love this man. He always said, "What makes NASA great is our basically our ground level managers, our people. Our people make us awesome." And he was a people person. He wasn't a people pleaser, but he was a people person. He loved
Yeah.
people so much.
No, I asked that question because I didn't want to bring politics into his list of accolades and accommodations.
Yeah. No, he
But
even if
I was just curious why
um,
he's not around anymore.
people were speculating if Clinton won, he would stick around for the transition. He was like, "Nope, I'm out of here." I have a
He's like,
granddaughter that's going to be looking at
yeah.
colleges, and I'm going to be flying around with her.
I think he's earned a retirement.
Oh yeah, and his wife has earned him on a vacation. So like, someone asked him what his plans were. And he's like, "Well, first, after I'm done, after I leave next week, I'm gonna go take my oldest granddaughter, and we're gonna go look at colleges. And then after that, I told my wife when I get back from taking our granddaughter around, um, I want you in that time to pick where you want to go. Anywhere on Earth is fine, um, and I will find the money to do it."
Could this man be any more perfect?
I don't know. I really don't. I'm sure he's got a flaw.
Like, I think you just described a modern day American god.
I am actually listening to that book right now, American Gods. It's trippy as fuck. But yeah,
Is he in there?
no, he's not, unfortunately.
I don't even know what that book's about. I've never heard of it.
It's
So
you should.
I'll add it to my reading list. American gods.
Anyway, so that's Charlie Bolden, and the X-57 was, I think, one of his things, and it's a fully electric airplane. Which then leads me into the really ugly part of this Authorization Act, and I'm going to bring in Trump's Make America Great Again budget on this one too. Which, by the way, his budget for NASA was $400 million smaller than the recommended appropriations from the committee in both the House and the Senate. Now, in fairness to the president, he doesn't give a shit about space, and also his budget was published before the Authorization Act went to his desk and passed the House and Senate.
Yeah.
So, but here's the ugly part. There is no mention of earth science whatsoever.
Because it's not a real field, Carl.
It's not a planet that we need to investigate in the universe. Like from Red Dawn, because we live here.
No, I think that's a good segue though, and we can talk. We can finish up your closing thoughts on the appropriations.
Yeah.
But I think the earth science is a good segue
I just
to.
want to mention real quick in Trump's budget the 3 missions that were cut, because I think those kind of pertain to what you're going to talk about quite a bit with when it comes to his regulations. So specifically, there was the Peace mission, which, as with everything at NASA, it's a friggin' acronym. It stands for Plankton Aerosol Cloud Ocean Ecosystem. So those are all the things that it studies. Sounds kind of important, right? Next mission is the Climate Absolute Radiance and Refractory Observatory, or Calario, or I can't even pronounce it. I'm having dyslexic moments. And then finally, there was a small camera on a satellite of the space station called Discover. And like, and I'm sorry, and then there was also the Orbiting Carbon Observatory 2, so the second version of it. I won't go really deep into detail about these things, but these are highly critical either advancements or new instruments observing the planet and how it is changing both naturally and how human activity is changing it. And those were not mentioned at all in the Authorization Act that is now law. But again, it's more of a kind of a rubber stamp recommendation guideline. And those are explicitly cut in the budget recommendation.
Hey, that's gonna be the theme of my segment too. Cuts.
Yeah. So with that, take it away.
All right.
Because we're
all right.
things.
So we're cutting things.
We're cutting me off. Finally.
Yeah, we're finally cutting you off. I have 15 minutes to get through this bill. not bill, this executive order. I'm sorry. We're going over, for those of you at home who want to print out yours and follow along, we're going over the presidential executive order on promoting energy independence and economic growth.
Oh,
It
man,
sounds
this is a
wonderful,
college
doesn't it?
class, all right? Like, I don't need to take notes, do I? This is gonna be a
I mean,
test session.
I'm taking notes. I got my reading list down. I got some people I got to look up after this about NASA.
As
Um,
long as that first one is Charlie freaking Bolden. That is.
oh yeah, I have in my notes. Fucking God. But anyway, so yeah, it sounds great. Promoting energy independence, economic growth. It sounds kind of like what he promised on the campaign trail, where he was going to bring back American core infrastructure, right? And by doing so, he was going to promote economic growth. And this was another one of his rubber stamp orders, kind of like the one he gave out about the wall, where he is doing so, and he's doing so in a flashy manner in order to get his core 25% voter base to believe that he is doing substantial policy orders. But the problem that he runs into on this order with the one like the wall is some of these things are so ingrained into our laws and at the federal and the state level that rescinding these is going to be a battle in the court that we already know the Trump administration is not good at fighting.
Yeah,
So
they are. God, who's really bad at the game in Game of Thrones? I don't want to say Sansa because I kind of like her. I don't know why.
dude, the Hound, he's awful at the game. He just wanted to like eat his chickens, but he got wrapped up and got like stabbed and left for dead and stuff. Like
No, he's like sadly.
he's good at
Sadly enough,
he's good at fighting.
you know, they're like Sir Dantos. You know, at doing this kind of
Yeah.
stuff like that. I mean, they're not good at fighting. They're just good at convincing people to do stuff. And
For those of you out there drinking at home, I'm sorry.
I am.
But
not.
anyway, yeah. Anyway, so it's another one of those these executive orders that we have to take with a grain of salt because while it is going to be held up in the court systems for a while, the U.S. Supreme or the U.S. court system, not Supreme Court, I'm sorry, the U.S. court system has shown that they are not afraid to take on this administration, which is good. It does open up some critiques on how the courts can sort of block presidential orders in a way that is kind of can create a bureaucratic mess, but that would be a whole nother story, a whole nother podcast. But it does kind of give us some insight onto how this administration views climate science, which is what I believe the biggest problem facing humans in the next half century. If we fail to take on this task and take it seriously, there are going to be grand repercussions. But I'm not going to get into those today. Today we're going over the bill and what it means.
I'll give a really brief college level lecture on the repercussions. Fucked.
Yeah. If you just put that on your essay test, the professor has to give you credit. So like I said, the main reason for him pushing this out is so he can appear to be making good on another campaign promise to bring jobs back to the coal belt in specific. The bill mentions coal a lot, and it mentions fossil fuels a lot. It doesn't mention it.
Not bill. Executive.
Executive order. I keep saying bill. Like I said, there's going to be some bugs in our first couple podcasts as we get used to talking about this stuff. But
apologize and move on.
Yeah. But it doesn't mention a whole lot of renewables and clean energy, except whenever it's repealing stuff that promotes them. So it's basically saying coal jobs are more important than the environment, and we'll get into why bearing the standard of coal is kind of a weak argument to make. But let's see what the bill kind of is ordering people to do. Within 45 days, the agencies named in the executive order have to give the director of the OMB, the Office on Management and Budget, and it has to give a couple other people like the vice president, the assistant to the president on economic policy, and then the only person that is going to be reviewing these agency orders from an environmental standpoint is the chair of the Council of Environmental Quality, which currently the chair of that council is named Mr. Vacant. There is no one as acting chair right now. I'm not entirely sure. I've been trying to find how that council operates whenever it doesn't have a chair, but it's something to take note of that the only environmental group looking over these proposals from these agencies is no one. So that kind of stuck out to me. And then it gives more timelines for, all right, when do you have to have your proposals finalized, and then it talks about the kind of timeline. You're looking at about 180 days until they want the orders on the president's desk to be signed. So we have 180 days to kind of go through this and be like, no, this is crazy stuff. But one thing it does say in this executive order that Trump wants taken immediately as soon as possible is he wants to rescind a whole bunch of Obama era climate change stuff, such as he wants to remove the executive order for preparing the United States for the impacts of climate change, the power sector carbon pollution standards, mitigating impacts on natural resources from development, stuff like that. The climate change and national security order. It wants to rescind all of those, as well as the presidential climate action plan, climate action plan strategy to reduce methane emissions, all sorts of stuff. So it wants to get rid of emission standards. It wants to get rid of how they dispose of waste products and stuff like that. And when I say emission standards, I mean for not just cars and trucks, but also power plants. It really pulls back a lot of those regulations on fossil fuel run power plants, which is not good if you're also getting rid of how you measure carbon in the air and stuff like that, and how you calculate
carbon observatory too.
Yeah. Because one of the things they want to do is they want to take out the cost of carbon analysis that we kind of use, where we give like a dollar amount to like how much damage in like monetary terms are we causing by having this carbon in the air. Like what is like our bottom line here? They want to completely get rid of that to where carbon is like a zero policy thing, where there's no monetary like factor to carbon, which is not good. It would stop holding the industry accountable for the damage it's doing. Because if you say that, well, you've caused this much damage, and they go, well, no, on this measurement, it says I've caused $0 in damage, then how do you enforce fines and stuff like that, right?
Well,
what else does it get rid of?
I would just say, burn it all to the ground.
Exactly.
That
I
would put
mean,
carbon in the air. So
yeah, in order to kind of keep this podcast within the time frame we want to keep it at, I'm not going to go over everything that it rescinds. I'll have there's a full write-up that I have of everything that it kind of ends. What I really want to talk about is why coal is a weak standard to bear, in terms of we're revoking all this climate policy so we can bring jobs back to the coal belt, right? Trump won the election based off that kind of rhetoric. Well, coal is a dying industry.
It was sexism and racism.
And that was the other half of it. But where was I? Coal's a dying industry, and it's not because of the regulations in place that have caused it. It's because the alternatives are becoming cheaper, and coal is not an efficient method of creating energy. It takes a lot of energy to get it out of the ground. It takes a lot of energy to burn it, and it doesn't produce a whole lot of energy. You need a whole bunch of it, right? And it's just getting more and more expensive. And that's just the free market, because like natural gas, wind and solar, a little bit of nuclear, all that stuff is becoming cheaper. And since it's cheaper than coal and more efficient than coal, why would they not use that instead? It's just business sense. And Mr. Trump, you're a businessman, so it doesn't make sense to me that you want to do all this harm that is going to cause monetary damage to the environment, while at the same time doing so to save an industry that is already in the decline.
This kind of goes to something else that I kind of forgot to mention a little bit of, which was the nationalistic aspects of some of the ideas that are hinted at and have been put forward in the past by Republicans in space. And it kind of goes to this kind of business mentality that you're talking about.
Yeah.
His business mentality is real estate. Get land, right? Well, what
Yeah.
gets land? Conquering kind of goes to this kind of business mentality that you're talking about.
Yeah.
His business mentality is real estate. Get land, right? Well, what
Yeah.
gets land? Conquering shit with
Yeah.
armies.
So yeah, what this bill, the executive order wants to happen is it wants to open up a whole bunch of federally protected land to coal mining and stuff like that. But the problem is the coal's market share in the energy market since 2006 was when I was seeing some of the numbers. It's fallen more than 53%. You have a job market that has been cut more than 50%. It's down from about 120,000 jobs to about 62,000 jobs. And at the meantime, you have renewables, green energy, and things like natural gas, which I'm not a huge fan of natural gas. It's better than coal, though. Um, those those jobs have broken the hundreds of thousands and continue to grow at a substantial rate while coal jobs continue to shrink. And like I said, that's not because of the regulations, that's because of the market. Um, you have things like how there have been no new coal powered power plants. I know it's powered twice in a row. Coal fueled power plants. There's been no new ones.
Yourself. You
Yeah,
committed the ultimate podcasting
yeah,
sin.
the double P.
Yeah.
Um, but there's been no new plans to build any of those, and they're actually shutting down at an alarming rate. With since November when Mr. Trump won the election, 6 have already shut down, and then in the next 4 years, there's a plan to shut down 40 more, and there's 0 plans to build new coal power plants. It just doesn't make sense. They're too wasteful. They cost too much, and the yield is just not worth the profit. But the executive order is going to allow the ones that are existing already to be able to do real and drastic harm to the environments around them. Problems that we will be dealing with long after the coal industry is gone. It takes a long time for nature to heal. It doesn't take a long time to poison it. It's relatively easy to kill it. It's hard to bring it back.
Actually, technically speaking, given the amount of technological power we have, we could probably do it in about 30 minutes.
I'm going to disagree on that one, but
A full global scale nuclear war, we could just screw it all up in 30 minutes. Yeah.
oh, you're talking about destroy it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's how fast we could just completely
yeah. That's how
destroy the planet.
I wasn't going to the nuclear option. I was just kind of going to the hey, we're going to dump our byproduct in the rivers option. But yes, we could.
Well, I just want to give that as an
Impact.
example. Yeah, we've been slowly screwing up the planet over the last 80 years since the Industrial Revolution, and we were really doing it in the last 30 years, and we've known about how we're doing it for the last like 25 years.
No, the last 50 years, man.
Oh, yeah.
From the 70s and the 60s.
Oh, right. I keep on thinking that I'm still in the 90s because I'm a kid.
Yeah, no, we're almost in 20, like we're almost in the 2020s, man.
You're making me feel old.
Right? No, like we've known about this stuff
Screw
for
it.
a half
I
century.
don't care. I'm gonna be around for it.
But yeah, so it just doesn't make sense to be doing all this harm to save an industry that's already dying. Removing these regulations is not going to help the coal industry in any substantial way. You have robotics that are going to be hitting the industry that are going to take jobs. At the same time, the jobs are on the decline because the need for coal is on the decline. I think right now, like the 3 biggest coal producers, and I could be wrong on this. I need to double or triple check this, but I believe that they're either in bankruptcy currently or they have just come out of bankruptcy, because it's just not a profitable industry anymore. It's becoming a very niche product, and so
does
that's.
that mean the hipsters are gonna hop on board that at some point?
I think they're gonna have coal-powered like ovens or something where you can make your
Yeah.
pizza taste like dirt.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, they would like that.
They would like that. But yeah, so Mr. President, if I know you love any, like you probably have like bots that just track Trump, like the name and stuff.
Trump,
yeah.
we mentioned
If you're listening to this, it's not a very good executive order. It doesn't make sense for the reasons you want it to, and it does a lot of harm that is going to cost a lot of money.
And it will not help the people that
Yeah.
were sent to
Is
Washington to serve.
Yeah. If
Um,
if you want to know more about the breakdown of the bill, the Brookings Institute has what I have found the best, most comprehensive write-up. I'll put that in the description. Conservatives think the Brookings Institute is liberal hippie schmuck, and liberals think the Brookings Institute is conservative garbage. But
so right in the center.
yeah, they classify as nonpartisan, which is kind of what you should be looking for with when it comes to environmental studies. You want to look for agencies that don't have um, deceitful intent.
At
You
least,
know.
I mean, obviously when it comes to science as well, but I mean, I think you're referring to policy.
Yeah.
Um,
So I know I kind of had to gloss over a lot of it. I didn't give it as much time as I had hoped, but
you can't let me talk as much next time. You got to tell me, Carl,
I
shut up.
told you there's a couple bugs, and the Carl length bug it'll need to be it'll need to be tweaked over a couple episodes. No, but I was actually interested in what you were saying. You
So
know so much about NASA, and it's just fun to listen
to
to you
bring
talk.
it back though to what you were saying about the business acumen of this man. So um, he's a strong man, and he is a
He's a
real
showman.
a real
He's a
estate
showman.
he's a real estate guy, right? So
Yeah, he's a showman. This
land
was a showmanship bill or
well, I
executive.
think
I keep
he's a
saying bill.
snake
God
oil
damn it.
salesman. I mean, particularly when you look at his VP and what he thinks of science. Um,
Yeah,
like
it's
when you were saying witchcraft and wizardry, and we're gonna do devil worship on Phobos, I was like thinking, no, that's Mike Pence. That's what he wants to do. But no
yeah,
women in the spacecraft. It has to be all men. Um,
yeah.
and I'll probably
So
actually do a whole episode on that at some point. How
yeah,
a mission to
I
Mars should be all women,
yeah, I
and not
really
because the astronauts in the past were all men.
yeah, I really want to stress though, to kind of summarize what this is happening. Go read the Brookings Institute breakdown, and the New York Times did a really good piece on it, and the Washington Post did a piece, kind of measuring how far away from the Paris Climate Agreement standards we will be if this all went into effect. It would put us back to basically the year 2003 in regards to our progress. Um, so if
Which we
you want to
cannot
know more,
afford
yeah,
anymore.
we cannot afford regress. We can only afford progress. So go read up about the bills on those. They have really good write-ups. But all in all, this bill is a massive repeal of kind of the last decade of climate progress that America has made. It's getting rid of all of it in order to give the fossil fuel industry one last hurrah before it sends us all into Mad Max universe.
Yeah, and
At least then I'll get
if we get
to
to
like
Mad
have
Max
people witness
universe, then
me.
we might end up in Dune universe where we're gonna try and terraform it back or some crap like that.
Yeah,
We will make a paradise of Arrakis.
there you go.
But to go back to the acumen before we just like have our little wrap up. I know we're running out of time, but real estate lends itself to that kind of strongman attitude, particularly in him. And so if you look at a couple of parts of the Authorization Act, like with the SLS, the rocket that we're working, or not what NASA is working on to get to Mars, in it, it says if they can find missions for national defense, they should be pursued for this rocket. So that means the deployment of communication satellites, spy satellites, but also the United States is investing a lot in satellite kill vehicles and anti-missile systems. And the SLS's power to lift up large pieces of hardware means that it could feasibly lift up something that could be rods from God. It's getting into that, lift capability range where that could be something you could do. And these are not things that people in the space defense industry have not been talking about. They've been talking about this stuff.
Yeah, they're
Um,
scared.
so there is, and then the idea of returning to the surface of the moon as the interim phase for human exploration rather than doing the arm thing also has some, I won't say militarization, but at least nationalistic thing behind it, because China.
Work.
So
And we've been doing this for a little over an
that's
hour.
the difference between you and me. I don't properly hydrate. Anyway, so there's this sinister synergistic orgy of possible destruction that's going on right now that scares the crap out of me.
Yeah, it's blatantly ignoring science that says like
Yeah.
this is going to be detrimental to us in order for
But this is
a very short-term monetary benefit.
Also, how it relates to space, because if you're wanting to go back to the moon, because other countries are there, that's inherently nationalistic instead of just for progress, right?
Yeah.
And
Like,
if you are trying, like, I don't know if this was in the other authorization acts, but I don't remember that being there, where the SLS was, they were trying to find other applications for it because its launch frequency is too, there's too much time in between launches of this rocket, because it's only for getting people to Mars, and deploying big pieces of hardware for human missions.
well,
So
with every time you launch it, though, you have the risk of it all like tearing to shreds. So you got to make sure that each launch it's ready to go. You can't rush these
well,
things.
I mean, like, trust me, once we launch them and test them, we can build them quickly. Like, that's not a problem.
Yeah.
Like, if we do one every like 4 months, that's fine. That's
Well,
actually
yeah, but if you wanna rebuild your prototype every month, that's going to be a little costly.
eh. Well, like I said, once we've tested it, like that, maybe I'll have to do an episode on like how engineering designing works. Like, once you do it once, it starts getting really easy and pretty damn cheap. Um, so, but the point is, like, in the last few authorization acts, when it comes to the SLS, they've mandated using it for the Europa Clipper mission, which I'm totally for because it will help test it and it will also do a really awesome mission because ice fishing on Europa is a thing. It's important and we should do it. Maybe not actually ice fishing, but investigating that moon would be amazing. But I haven't seen this
The
whole
Loch Ness monster is just swimming around there.
yeah, we haven't seen this military application thing before with it, and the amount of power it has to lift up stuff and deploy it
Yeah,
in orbit, in
and I don't
high
want.
orbits and stuff like that.
Yeah, I
It,
don't want the funding going to where the militarization is the priority for this stuff.
well,
Because
I don't think
then,
it would be the priority for SLS.
well, no, I'm not saying it will be. I'm saying I don't want it to start becoming the trend,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
even slightly.
NASA walked itself away from that kind of thing very slowly over the
The
course of its
military
history.
hasn't. The military has enough budget. If they want to figure out how to do that,
Oh,
take
the
it
Air Force's
take it out of
space
their
budget
budget.
is 3 times NASA's.
Yeah, I know. Like, don't make NASA do that. That's not in the core values of NASA. Let NASA be like where exploration and adventure are at the hearts of the things, not destroying things.
Excitement, heh, adventure,
Yeah,
heh.
like
NASA
let us
seeks
have
not these things. We seek knowledge and
let it
progress.
let us have that like that childhood ambition, that childhood
By the way,
imagination.
that
You
was a
know,
Star Wars reference. So
I know.
we're really
I'm
low on
choosing
time.
to ignore them.
I do want to get to this final point about how it synergizes with what you're saying and why I think he's doing it. And it's not so much like, oh, that this is being thought of in detail. It's just their general ethos lends itself to these decisions. And so you're getting into a situation where you are harming even the military's ability to protect the country because you're ordering them not to take into account that their ports that they dock at are going to change, right? Like, you're not letting them do that.
Yeah.
And
And what he means by that is like the ports that they dock at are going to change because the tide is going to be multiple feet higher and multiple
because
feet
water's
back.
going to rise, all right?
Yeah.
Water's going to go, get bigger. Um,
Yeah, when you completely like defund all of this science, it has not just an ecological impact, it also has an economic impact.
yeah.
It has a security impact. General Mattis, who is on Trump's like cabinet, he has even come out and said that climate change is going to be the biggest disruptor of global security.
Global even came out and said, "Trump, stick with the Paris Agreement for the love of God."
Yeah, yeah, it's going
they've
to.
known about climate change and sea level rise for years and just kind of like hit it, but they adapted their
Yeah,
drilling hardware. But now they're finally taking the hint, like, maybe we shouldn't be an oil company and we should be an energy company, right?
yeah, but that's going to be the topic of another video where we kind of talk about the. That was one of our ideas for a podcast for another week, talking about the effects of climate change, not just ecological, but in terms of national security, economics, all that stuff, taking all that into account to paint the full.
Jobs.
Yeah, you gotta bring back a dying industry, man,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
the free market needs government interference. That's what they all are. That's what all the conservatives argue, right? Get the government in our market. Get the government in our market.
Okay. See, that's what I find really funny is a lot of times when I find myself making arguments, it's like, but this actually creates competition and helps small businesses grow instead of stifling them. And the people
Yeah,
just stare
it's
at me
almost
like,
it's
wait, you're a liberal? And I'm like, Yes.
Yeah. No, but that's my points on the executive order. Go read the Brookings Institute write up. I really enjoyed it. The author of it, who is what's his name? Nathan Holtman. He did a really good job on that.
So
Um,
my last 2 points are on misconceptions that I have read about and heard about from people on the right and people on the left when it comes to NASA policy overall, but I'm going to use the Authorization Act specifically. So on the right, I hear a lot of folks always say, well, why don't we take Earth science and move it over to the EPA and NOAA?
well,
Now,
the EPA is looking to be defunded by
I'll get to that in
two-thirds
here
for
just a
one.
second. I'll get to that in here just a second. So if NASA builds space stuff, right? We're really good at it. We're also good at running those missions, the communications infrastructure. Well, and I say we, I really should not say that, but NASA's really good at that stuff and has the infrastructure to do that stuff. And it has the expertise to do that stuff. And the expertise of studying the Earth and also studying Mars synergize with each other with the types of vehicles that NASA is good at building and good at designing and good at operating. So if you were to genuinely want to take all the management infrastructure, all the scientific infrastructure, all the brain trust, all the manufacturing infrastructure of NASA that is in Earth science, you would actually be taking a big slice of the Earth's, not the Earth sciences, the planetary sciences away from NASA and giving it to NOAA. Or you would have to give NOAA and the EPA way more money than they're getting right now to build all new infrastructure and hire all new scientists and engineers and things like that. And this is a small club. Um, we need more, and I work every day to try and encourage kids to pursue STEM. It's like a third of the reason why I do what I do. So I think it's a tragedy that we have so few engineers, even though I'm a liberal arts major. But like we have a
Dude,
talent pool.
it's hard to be an engineer, man.
We have a talent pool. Well, thank you to our primary and secondary education system. Um, so we have a limited talent pool, and these people are better off working with each other and collaborating with each other on planetary science because Earth science is basically planetary science because we are
No,
literally studying a planet. It just happens to
no,
be
I
Earth, and
agree.
there happen to be so many missions that are studying Earth in planetary science. It makes more sense from a programmatic and managerial standpoint to at least create uh, a side structure, right? Because there are almost as many Earth science missions at NASA as there are all of planetary science missions.
No, I 100% agree.
But those two management structures work much better when they're in the same agency. Hell, most of them are at the same place in Goddard.
Yeah,
And
and they're already
yeah,
established, so
and
it would just be
there is a
redundant to
reason
have to
why it is
rebuild
that
them.
way because again, this stuff is done in space, and EPA and NOAA do stuff on Earth, right?
Yep.
And now, as far as scientific collaboration, oh yeah, you better believe that is really good and really important, but it already is. It doesn't need to be changed. So not
Yeah.
only is the idea of transitioning this over is just from a managerial and infrastructural logistics standpoint, just stupid. It'll cost more money. It'll be less efficient. It just won't work well
Which, Mr. Trump, you're a businessman. How do you not understand the economics of these decisions?
because they don't actually want to move these missions to the EPA or NOAA.
They just want
They just
to
want to cut them.
eliminate them. Yeah,
And
because
that's the
they
real
know
thing. That's
they
the
know if
real
they
thing.
get moved. Yeah, they know if they get moved, they're
They're
not
never going to
going
get
to.
revived.
They're never going to get revived. They're going to not meet the requirements, and then they're going to lose the funding, and the projects will be scrapped.
Okay, and so to my so first of all, to anybody on the right who's listening to this who thinks that Earth science should be somewhere else, first of all, you're being lied to. If you actually do value studying the planet in the home that you live on, which I think you do, um, and at least knowing the weather, if not the climate, better, and studying the biosphere, if you do value that, it belongs at NASA. NASA is good at this, and it's good at doing the knowledge collaboration and knowledge sharing with the EPA and NOAA and the Department of Energy and the Interior. Um, that's where it needs to stay. And if you think it does need to be moved, and you do genuinely think it is more efficient for it to be at the EPA or NOAA because they do the Earth stuff, You are being lied to because it will not go there.
No, it's just going to be cut.
Yeah. Now, on the left, something that I think is equally as egregious of a mischaracterization, though probably not as important because, again, we live here. We only have one home for the foreseeable future. Earth is, as Sagan said, where we make our stand. And I'm going to pick on somebody from the left who I love, and I think she does a great job, but I think she and other people get this wrong, and her name is Rebecca Watson. I highly recommend checking out her channel, but I think she got this wrong, so I'm going to pick on her because it's how I show my love. One of the big things that's said on the left a lot, and was said by Rebecca Watson when she went over the Authorization Act, is that there's a contention in the scientific community whether or not we should actually send people to Mars, whether or not it's really valuable. And one of the big reasons why that is a thing, even though Jim Green, who is the head of planetary science and deals with the human exploration side of things, thinks that humans should go to Mars, pretty much everybody that I have ever met at NASA who deals with planetary science, and that's uncrewed missions, are like, we either need a lab with people on it or we need to bring stuff back from Mars to a lab with people in it. And I'm for the lab on Mars with people in it because it's easier to bring back more rocks to the lab that's on Mars rather than bring back rocks from Mars all the way to Earth in a lab. So yeah, no. The reason why there is a debate, and it's mostly with like astronomers and shit, but the reason why it's a debate is because the science stuff is a tiny, tiny, tiny pie, and everyone's fighting for it, right? And that's why there's a controversy. Also, curiosity in its years of being on the surface of Mars, a human could do the work that it has done in a couple of days, right?
Yeah, it's not the most efficient robot.
And none of them are, because it just takes so long to communicate all these, and they can't think. And
Yeah.
robots are not going to be thinking anytime soon, the way that we would need them to really explore very well.
Yeah.
And so from a practical scientific standpoint, the argument that there's some kind of controversy and we should just be sending uncrewed missions. Yeah, we could send a lot more of them, but I still don't think it would entirely make up for the science that could get done. Then there's the industry thing. Remember all that stuff I was saying earlier on about the manufacturing and Apollo and 3D printing and all that kind of stuff. There's that.
Yeah.
You will not get that with uncrewed missions. You will only get that with crewed missions. And then finally, my absolute favorite quote from an astronaut of all time is the gruff and tough Gus Grissom. And he was asked about the risk of human spaceflight. And he said, "We are in a risky business, and if something happens to us, we hope that it will not delay the program. But the conquest of space is worth the cost of human life, for our God-given curiosity will send us there ourselves, for in the final analysis, the moon can only be understood by man in terms that are understandable to other men." In short, it is the vicarious experience of discovery that motivates us. Only a robot can tell us what the moon is made out of. It can tell us what the temperature on Mars is, but only a human being can stand on the moon, on that white and gray dead world, and look back across 250,000 miles of the dark abyss of space and time to this tiny little blue jewel swirled with white, our home, the Garden of Eden, and exchange that experience to the rest of humanity. Only that can happen. And the dividends that are paid on that perspective shifting moment of epiphany and inspiration to pursue new grandiose goals. There is no scientific discovery. There is no new economy. There is nothing that in any way, shape, or form even comes close to the value of those moments. And those can only be done by people, period. So that is why we must send humans to Mars. Home because it is where we make our stand, but in the act of the discovery of the methods of going to Mars, we may motivate ourselves and also learn means to save our home. And for that reason, and that reason alone, we must go further, because the timeline of human history is hung on exploration, and it's people that are explorers, not robots. They're our vanguard. but they are not the true explorers. It's people that do the exploring. And so that is my big qualm with folks on the left, and I think that is uh, a gross mischaracterization that Rebecca Watson and others have made about what NASA should be doing. And one of the reasons, going back to Charlie B., which, by the way, he was a major general. I apologize, sir, um, in the Marine Corps. So not a lieutenant general, a major general in the Marine Corps.
Because he already didn't,
Yeah,
like, how could we forget that? I mean, his list is so short.
exactly. Oh, he also initiated like the NASA Technology Office, which deals with technology. The
You're cutting into my dinner
the
time.
general point is like the reason why I really love him so much is because he believed in a holistic NASA. And that's what we need. More than anything else is a holistic NASA with ambitious missions on a reasonable but tight timeline that pushes every facet of human knowledge, human ingenuity, human ambition, and exploration for peace and prosperity and collaboration amongst all human beings. That's what we need. And to nix out human missions to Mars and say that's not quite the valuable thing that we should be doing with NASA's money is wrong. Just period. End of story. Wrong.
See, In Spaces on the Left is actually a nonpartisan podcast because we don't believe that liberals. Wait, which black dude?
Both of them. I mean, I love Robert Lightfoot. He's from Marshall, and he did stuff at Stennis. He knows human exploration. He knows rocketry really really well.
But he's no Charlie B.
I won't say that. I think he's a really great guy. I think he's also somebody who is a strong contributor to NASA's mission. So I won't. I really love Charlie. I'm a big fan of his. But like I'm not going to
Well,
dog on Robert Lightfoot.
I think a lot of NASA administrators going back, they have a pretty solid history. Like,
No, Charlie was
but
special.
Charlie definitely sounded like an exception. You know more about the history
Charlie's
of
a
that than I do, though.
special human being. But
All
yeah,
right,
like
wrapping up the
let us know what you think. Let us know what you want to
there's
hear.
not a whole lot to go over with this. The executive order is I have a little asterisk here after the name that I wrote is "Long Live Coal." That's pretty much the executive order in
Yeah,
a
it
nutshell.
reminds me of the Foundation series when the great empire started breaking apart and the Foundation was like, wait, our neighboring planets are going back to fossil fuels and they're not using nuclears? Morons. Um, but yeah, let us know what you think. Let us know what you want to cover until we start getting comments on specific subjects of Mars. that and the engineering behind it and what we could possibly get out or maybe not get out of putting a crew on top of that mission in 2018 or 2019.
And in typical Justin fashion, I have about 4 ideas that I want to do, and I haven't decided yet. But that's why we have a. This is a. Because there's a lot of information out there. We are in the information age, and it can be very difficult.